Welcome to the Mindset, Marketing and Money podcast hosted by me, Dean Seddon. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. So we're going to talk about money in this episode of the podcast and how you make the money that actually gives you the freedom. And I'm going to share a story of somebody I know who never really ran a business, but actually felt like they were in a job. And I spent a lot of time with this person trying to help them out of what was a real tricky situation. They weren't broke, they weren't rich, but they worked 40, 50-hour weeks flat out. And I mean proper 40, 50 hours. I don't mean where we have little breaks in between and dilly-dally. I mean proper flat out. That was how much time they were working. And they were, they weren't broke, but they weren't wealthy either. They weren't free. They couldn't go on holiday for very long because literally they had to work. And I want to talk about how do we get ourselves into that position, but also how do we get ourselves out of that position. And let me start at the beginning with this client. So I've known this person for a long time, long time, and they are in the kind of software development space. And I'm not saying names because, it's a real person and I don't want them to feature too prominently because they might not appreciate it. So they're in the software development space and they've got clients, they've got happy clients, delivering a great service, all that kind of stuff, but they are flat out and they can't get their clients to pay a bit more so that they make a bit more money. So they'll do more work for them, they'll do more projects for them, but they can't seem to break this hourly rate mentality. And the client was really frustrated about this and almost angry that these clients were doing this to them. And I spent, some of my time when, I launched the Accelerator, which is a way to help people implement. But a lot of my time is actually spent more like a therapist than a marketing guidance person. Because often what I find is the problems that are holding people back are nothing to do with LinkedIn. They're nothing to do with the marketing. It's actually all in the person's head. The way they think about it, the experience, childhood shit, all that kind of stuff is percolating in them to the point where they can't actually take any action or do the right things. And so I'm having this conversation and I'm saying, there's other clients out there. We need to go out and get some other clients who will pay a bit better. And he was really angry, like bitter almost inside about how these clients were like not paying him his true worth. And I said to him, we were having a conversation about it. And then at the same time, he brought up how there's some consultants in his world that will go in and then hire him and make a margin on top of him. And they do very little. He basically does the work. And he was frustrated that these consultants really don't know what they're doing, not as experienced as him, but they made more money than him. And I said, well, where you are at the moment, and I spotted this quite quickly, where he is at the moment, he's at the bottom end of the market where all the value has gone out of what he does. And what I mean by that is, like, how do I explain this? If you're at the end of a process, most of the value is not in doing the little bits, the technical bits. It's actually the concept, the creative, the strategy, the how it will unlock. All of that stuff at the front end is where the value is. And it's a bit like, for an example, if you think about how this works in terms of every other business, if you're just solving a problem with a lot of supply, you will have downward pressure on your business. And in his scenario, He'd based in the UK. There was companies in India who could do what he did. There was companies in Portugal and the Far East that could do what he did, in Eastern Europe, that would charge less. So he wasn't in a space where there was high demand and short supply. He was actually in high supply and short demand at the end of the process. Now, if you go a bit further up his process, the auditing, the consultancy, the strategy, there's not a lot of people who could do that. And that's where all the money was. And he was basically, his business, although he had multiple clients, he was in effect a freelancer. And there was a ton of people who could do what he did. So I'm talking to him about, you've got to get out of this space, like this rat race where you're doing things as a freelancer, but you've got a decent living, but you're flogging yourself. You're not really enjoying the business. You're getting bitter and twisted about it. A customer doesn't pay him on time and it's tough. It's a bit tough month. All of this stuff's going on, which gives you an indication that the fundamentals of his business were not right. If he's working flat out, he should be making serious bank. And this brings me to the topic of today's podcast, really, is if you are working 40 hours a week flat out, you should be making serious money. And by that, I mean, right, I don't know what it is here, but roughly the minimum wage these days is about 25,000 quid a year. Right. So if you work 40 hours a week and you make every week and you make 25,000 a year, you're on minimum wage. But I always say to people, if you're flat out, if you are absolutely flat out as a business owner, you should be making like 100K a year minimum. And I don't mean business, I mean you, 100K. If you're flat out, pedal to the metal, you should be making 100K. But the reality is that most business owners, the average business owner, makes less than 50K a year. So this comes down to fundamentals of their business. It comes down to pricing. It comes down to the way they operate. But fundamentally, I want to tackle it from a pricing point of view. If you think about it, right, let's say, and most of my audience are people selling their expertise in some way, service providers, social media consultants, marketing people, coaches, consultants, people who are selling what they know or what their experience or their know-how or their skill set. If you think about that, right, and you go, hang on a minute, I have to make 100K a year after my costs. You need to sit down and go, well, how does that work? What does that look like? And what most people do is create the fatal error of dividing their 100K by 40 hours. It's a total mistake. Because, of course, you will not work flat out on billable stuff for 40 hours a week. Barely, if you're lucky, 20 hours a week. So for an example, when I do coaching sessions with clients, I've got an hour beforehand of preparation. I've got the hour I'm spending with them, and then probably some notes and stuff afterwards. So 1 hour of deliverables is probably about maybe 2.5 hours of back-end work. So realistically, if I was doing 10 hours of billable work for a client, there's probably another 20 hours of behind-the-scenes work. And so where people make the mistake is they go, right, well, 100,000, I've got some costs. I divide that by 40 hours. Oh, I have to do the calculator for this because I can't work it out in my head. But, if I go really simple and go £100,000, I want 2 weeks off at Christmas and 2 weeks at the summer. So divide it by 48. Oh, I need to charge £2,000 a week. £2,000 a week in billables. Oh, I can work 40 hours. That's £52 an hour. And people go, oh, that's all right. And then I put a bit of cost on and it's go, oh, I can do it for £100 an hour. You cannot deliver your business. You cannot deliver your service. Right now, I'm going to tell you flat out, you cannot deliver your business for 100 quid an hour. It just will not work. Even if you're a solopreneur. Because you will have to think about it. Let's just work this out the other way, right? £100,000 divided by 48 weeks, fair enough, £2,000 a week, right? Actually, maybe you can only do 10 hours of client work because you've got admin, marketing time, all that stuff, and you don't want to be working 60 hours a week. So realistically, you've only got 10 billable hours. That's £208 an hour. £208 an hour. And I did a podcast a while ago and said, you have to charge $250 an hour. And some people just can't get their heads around that because they don't stack up. Like, hang on a minute, I've got 10 hours of billable time working for clients, but actually there's another 20 hours work of prep time, rework, God knows what. So that 10 hours of billable has to cover at least another 20 hours. So you got that bit in. Then you got the marketing time. Then you got all the other stuff. You're counting on all that stuff time. So in reality, you're working 10 hours delivering for clients to generate revenue to cover you for 40 hours work. So if you're flat out and you want to make 100K, you have to do it in the 10 hours. You have to make the 100K in the 10 hours. Most people don't get this. And they wonder why. And they get to the point where they're so resentful of their clients because the clients, they're working flat out for clients, working late into the night, doing longer hours than they would if they were in a full-time job for the same money. And it comes down to how you design your business so that your business works for you. Yes, we're here to do a good job and help people and customers, but we're not a charity. You're not a charity. And so the customers, if you are flat out working with customers to the point where you can't take any more on because you will break, you should be making a killing, an absolute killing. But the reality is, most business owners, a lot of business owners, are not designing their business that way. And so they end up where they are running flat out to the point where they're going to break to make 40 grand or 50 grand. They could make, if they were doing the same level of work in a larger organization, they could make at least double that. Now, this all comes into play because if you then run flat out for bare minimum, you can't put money away, you can't do those special things, you can't take the time off, you can't have a runway if you want to take some time off and go, let's just do 3 months down time. None of that happens. None of it happens because all you've done is turned your business idea into a full-time job. Now, I'm going to walk you through how, if I'm going to put myself in a situation where I'm an imaginary person like that guy I talked to you about, he's out of that world now. He's doing much better. He's much happier, but he had to make the leap from abandoning some of the clients and letting go of some of the clients that were keeping him there. And none of this, by the way, was his client's fault. So that guy who was running flat out for average money, it wasn't his client's fault. It was his. But the resentment of his decisions was manifesting in him resenting the work he was doing. So it shifted from, I've designed this, I'm going to do this. It happens. I'm now working flat out, making mediocre money. I now resent the work. I get frustrated working all this time, get angry about it, downbeat about it. And now that's going to manifest itself in me hating my clients. And that's where he was. And you have to, and then we went through a whole process where we decided a new path. And he was like, I can't let go of these clients because how am I going to make money? How am I going to do this? He didn't have any time to make the shift. And so the fear of being worse than where he is was holding him in position. Big issue. We could have a whole podcast about the fear of losing keeps you in a prison. The fear of losing out and losing money and not making it and all the consequences of that keeps you in shackled in a prison that is horrific. And if you don't get out of it, you basically go, this prison's not so bad, I'll live there. So you've got to make, and I'm using 10 hours because that's a reasonable amount of billable hours. You've got to use 10 hours of money making time, time that you are on the clock making money for your business, billable time. You've got to make that pay for at least 30 hours. So you got to make, if it is 10 billable hours, you've got to make that pay your whole week. So how do we do that? How do we make 10 hours a week bring us in 2 grand a week? So £200 an hour. So when you think about that, it sounds like, oh, that's a lot. How do I charge £250 an hour, £210 an hour? How do I get people to pay that? And this is where we have to decouple from what we think we're worth. We have to decouple from a price per hour, mentally decouple from the price per hour, because that's the wrong way to think about it. And instead, we have to couple to the value unlocked. So, for an example, I have a coaching program called the Accelerator. It's depending on which version you take, but it's anywhere from 3 to 10 grand to be part of it. So it's quite expensive. You know, you buy a LinkedIn course for $200, right? Why would somebody pay 3 grand or 10 grand? Well, it's because I'm going to help them put the systems in place. So I'm not just going to give them a course and they buy that course. They watch some of the videos. Most people don't watch the videos, by the way. Most people don't implement. Instead, what I'm doing is I'm forcing people to implement, and I kick them up the butt to get them to do the work so that they build those systems, they get the reps in to actually get the results. And so instead of just going, here, do this, post this type of thing, do this, I'm going like, here's our plan. What are we doing? Pushing people to a result, even when sometimes their emotions get in the way, their thinking gets in the way. So it's a pricey thing. But what I'm selling to them, the value unlocked for them is peace, freedom, financial stability, better money. And so if I can say to people, right, okay, you as a solopreneur in the next year, you need to take home £100,000 a year. That means we have to sell something across LinkedIn that will make you at least £200 an hour on average, 2 grand per week. And my job then is to make them, help them, kick them to get that into place so that they make that 100k a year in their own hands. That's the value of my product. The value of my product is not the time I spend with them. The value of my product is not how much they pay me per hour. The value of the product is in me helping them get to that freedom, that peace of mind, that security. That's what it is. And they want certainty about how to do that, of course. And the more certain are, the more likely they are to buy. And that's why I back it up with, we will work with you come what may for up to a year to get you to that place. So we offer an open-ended support because we want everybody to get there. Even if you're a slow starter, even if you're kind of a technophobe, even if you're an overthinker, even if you're a self-doubter, we will push you there. And if it takes us a month, as it's done with one of our clients, or it takes us 10 months or 12 months, we will do it. So that's the reassurance. But ultimately, they want that peace, that freedom, that security. And that's the price. That's the value for them. The £200 an hour, the 3 grand, is nothing if it gets them there. And so many of you listening to me or watching me, if you're watching this on YouTube, will have never dug deep enough to figure out, how do I position myself to deliver to price to the value of what I'm going to help people unlock? And the reason why most people don't think about it is often because, number one, they're not thinking about their clients in any depth. They're just going, oh, I can help you with this. They're not thinking about what does it mean for them? What will it change for them? And really deeply digging into the value unlocked, the value realized because of what you do. we often do what the guy I was talking to you about is we position ourselves at the lower end of the value chain. We position ourselves as the person who can click the buttons and do the things and give me sessions to help me get there. When we should be positioning ourselves higher up the value chain of being the person who can help you go from there to there, from A to B. And we don't take the time to really understand what's the size of this problem and what's the size of this gain for this audience, for this decision maker. Because at the end of the day, right, I pay 10 quid or whatever to go to watch a movie, right? I'm going to watch a movie because I think it's going to be exciting, it's going to be entertaining, it's going to be engaging, I'm going to have a great time. I am not going for the seats per se. I'm going for the overall experience of what that will be. There are components that make it more interesting, but ultimately, I want to be positioned at the top end of the value and saying, wherever you are right now, I'm going to get you there. And the bits that I do, the strategies I employ to get you there is the value. The support I put in to get you there is the value. But ultimately, the people only sign up with me and they'll only sign up with you because they believe you will get them there. They want you to, they will pay if they believe and they're convinced you can get them somewhere. And in order to know what that somewhere is, you have to really deeply dig into where your clients are at, where your ideal client is at, and figure that out so that you can actually communicate, this is where I'm going to get you. And it brings me to another challenge people have. Lots of people, and there's so much nonsense about don't niche down on LinkedIn. It's total rubbish. It really is rubbish. Right? If you can clearly articulate where you'll get to for a defined audience, they will get it faster. So if I can say to lawyers, I can make you courtroom confident. If you've got doubts, maybe imposter syndrome, bit of self-confidence issues, and you're worried about your courtroom performance, and I can say, I can make you courtroom confident, even if you've got imposter syndrome, even if you've got your self-doubts, even if you get nervous, I can communicate that value really clearly because I'm talking to lawyers in courtrooms. And the more clearly I can define my audience, the more valuable I become because I'm becoming a specialist. And the universal law of everything is specialists make more money than generalists. Surgeons make more money than general doctors. It's the way the world works. Specialists get paid more. So if I can become a specialist in solving a particular problem, and in my case, it's not, I'm going to show you how to use LinkedIn because that's on Google. People are posting about that on LinkedIn every day, right? I'm the specialist in getting you from, I've bought a course, another course, because most people buy loads. I've never implemented half of these courses. My specialism is getting you, cleaning up your head, sorting your head out, getting you to take action, and getting you to the end result, where you have the time, the money, and the freedom and the options to actually do what you really want. But if we become specialists, not in what we solve and who we solve it for, our value increases. If we are a generalist, we get less. In my world, if you're a LinkedIn trainer and you specialize in cybersecurity, you'll get more money, more deals, more opportunities because you are focused. So if you start to do that, then you can actually really understand the problem and the value more deeply to be able to support commanding that higher fee that gives you the freedom. If you're a generalist and you talk in general terms and you position yourselves in general terms, When people approach you, they might see you're a nice person, they might see what you're knowing about, but if they see somebody else who's specialist for their industry and their problem, they'll probably go with them because they'll think their advice, their solution is a better fit for them. So people will pay more to go with a specialist than a generalist. And you might think, well, I'm not I'm not a generalist because I specialize in one particular area. I specialize in mindset or imposter syndrome. For who? Imposter syndrome for who? Because a CEO of a global company will think differently about their imposter syndrome than a person who's got imposter syndrome in their first management role. Also, the scale of the problem, the impact of the problem is totally different. You can be a mindset coach to a small business owner with limited funds, and you can be a mindset coach and help people overcome imposter syndrome where their CEOs are earning multi-million-dollar salaries. They will pay you differently, but they will expect different results. Different results. Small business owner might be, I want to feel more confident in doing more videos, but I always feel like a failure and a fake. Small business owner. So, okay, small business owner, I'm going to work with you and help you feel more confident, make you feel more comfortable doing videos. Wow, that'd be great. Yeah. How much are you prepared to pay for that? £400. It's a lot of money, right? Okay, Mr. Boardroom, you're going on to global events, boardrooms. You're dealing with big hostile boardroom battles, negotiating with big banks, and you feel like an imposter. And sometimes you feel intimidated. I'm going to make you feel stronger because you're responsible for a $1 billion business. It's 20,000, please. Yeah, I need to do it because if I cock this up, the consequence. Now, of course, we can talk about mindset all across LinkedIn, right? Or imposter syndrome and try and hedge the bets between those two worlds. But the value, the examples, the stories you tell, everything that you say will be different. Same problem, same probable solution. But the people's perspective, the value involved, the problem involved, the scenarios, the situations, the circumstances are totally different. So if you really want to charge big money, like my friend and client who was in this mess and flat out but making average money, payroll money, flat out but making the same money as he would have employed, he had to transition from I'm selling to the wrong people. I'm selling and marketing myself to the wrong people where they don't value the problem enough to pay me to make my business work. I need to be selling to the people over here who will pay me 2 and 3 times more because the problem is more. And I'll wrap up with this with what we did with the client. So what we did is the consultancy work itself, he could actually do and was doing. The difference was he wasn't putting the whole process together. So he spent some time reforming to go in earlier to the client to do the consultancy work and then do the delivery work separately. And what he decided to do is actually do what we call an audit. So he would go in and audit a company and charge a fee to do the audit. Then the delivery side of it, he outsourced with a margin. So he was making his money on the audit and the overage of the fees from outsourcing the actual techie work to somewhere else. So he ended up going from working flat out to doing audits for £10,000. So he'd do an audit for £10,000 and then get this batch of ongoing delivery work that was flat out 40, 50 hours a week of delivery work that he was just making a leverage on top. So he went from, and this is the reality if you plan this out, he went from working flat out himself and barely making, a reasonable income by, employment standards, to he was making these big chunks would drop 2 or 3 of those a month. So he'd make 30 odd grand there. But then he was making £1,000 a week in the overage of outsourcing. So the outsourcing itself wasn't quite enough to make the money. But because he positioned himself and was selling into different businesses where they valued it more and valued his involvement and supervision, he actually engineered himself out of a lot of work, like tons of work. Because it wasn't just about trying to ratchet up the price with his existing customers. He had to change his customer base because the problem wasn't valuable enough. So the market is the market. If I've got a problem and you offer me a price, I will judge how big is this problem, how big is your price, and I will make a call about whether it's worth it. That's unique to me. You might think it is worth it, but I might not. It's subjective. But if I change the customer and the customer's problem to a bigger problem or valuable problem, and I change my price and position my price, again, a different customer would see that price completely in a different light. And this is what you guys listening to me have to do. If you're not making and taking home £8,000 a month, then you have to shift your business to engineer that out. Because what's the point in working if you can't enjoy it? What's the point in work? And hang on, before I do that, some of you are going to say, well, I do enjoy my work and I don't mind that I don't make good money. Well, that's not the right attitude. I should enjoy my work and make great money. It's like a fundamental rule. Enjoy work, make great money. Those two things have to go together, but we have to position our business, position ourselves in that place where we can appealing to customers who see the value of paying us more. And that's about our offer. It's about who we're targeting. It's about the message we're using. And it's about the process and the system that we're using to make that money. So go listen to the old podcast I did about making 250 quid an hour. But this is a fundamental rule. If you are not charging, when you tot it all up, if you're not generating at least 250 quid an hour, you are basically sacrificing your own financial well-being to help customers. And that sounds very noble, but it sounds very charitable, but you're not a charity. You're not a charity. You're here to do something and make something and achieve something. So think about this. Am I targeting? Are you targeting? Are you acquiring customers who won't pay you what you're worth? That's not their fault. That's yours. But you can change it. And when you do change it, the freedom, the finance, the fun all kicks in. So I'd encourage you to do this audit and go, how do I engineer that $250 an hour, 10 hours a week, pays me for the whole week? That's what you need to be thinking. Think a bit more strategic about it. How do I position all of this so it gives me that money? Big picture thinking will actually unlock this. So I hope this has been helpful. Go do it. Go think about it. Go look at your business and how do you change it? How do you make that difference? Thanks for joining me on this episode of Mindset, Marketing and Money Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe so you get notified about future episodes.